They say nothing is stronger than sisterhood. But I learned the truth while lying in my hospital bed, staples in my side, four in my arm, and my husband's texts lighting up her phone. I gave her my kidney, and she gave him her body. Just a room away. While I bled for her, they moaned for each other. My name is Delilah Harris. I'm 39 years old, a registered trauma nurse, and a woman who once believed that love and loyalty were enough to survive anything. I had been married to Matthew for 11 years, solid, strong, boring in all the right ways. And my younger sister, Jolene? She was my shadow growing up. The kind of sister who painted my nails before prom, cried at my wedding, and once took a baseball bat to a guy who broke my heart in college. She was my person. Until she became my punishment. It started with the diagnosis, stage 4 renal failure. Jolene needed a kidney. Fast. My parents were devastated, and of course, I didn't hesitate. I rushed through testing, signed the forms, kissed my husband goodbye, and let them slice into my body for her. I remember waking up from surgery in pain, but smiling, knowing I'd saved her life. Matthew was there at my bedside with flowers. Jolene cried and thanked me. Everything felt right. For 3 days. By day 4, Matthew started skipping visits. Jolene's room, down the hall, always had the door closed. The nurses said he was in there, supporting her emotionally. I thought, okay, maybe she needs him more. She'd always been the fragile one. Sensitive. Lonely. My big heart made excuses for what my gut screamed to confront. But then I got discharged. I came home early to surprise them both. My stitches ached, and I walked slower, leaning on the walls. The house was too quiet. No TV. No footsteps. Just a soft thump from upstairs. Our bedroom. I remember limping up the steps, every nerve in my body telling me don't open that door. But I did. Of course I did. They weren't naked. Not that time. But Matthew was shirtless, his hand on her thigh, and her hair still wet from a shower she hadn't taken in her own guest room. The air was thick with steam and guilt. Jolene jumped. Matthew stuttered. I said nothing. Just smiled. Because I already knew. The day before I was discharged, I had found his texts to her. Dozens. You're so different from Delilah. When she's asleep, I think about you. We shouldn't, but it feels right. I read them in my hospital bed and didn't scream. I just forwarded every message to myself. Saved the photos. And began plotting. See, while they were busy in fantasy, I was busy in reality. I changed my will, left my money to a burn recovery nonprofit, and named my dog as my medical proxy. I revoked Matthew's access to my insurance. I also submitted both their names and photos to a cheaters awareness billboard campaign in Times Square. Anonymous submission. National reach. Big, bold faces. A headline that read, "She gave her a kidney. They gave her betrayal." When the billboard went viral, Jolene locked herself in her apartment for a week. Matthew lost his job. His boss's wife had just donated her kidney too. The media picked up the story. They begged me to take it down. Said it was humiliating. Said it was too far. Too far? I gave her my organ. She gave him her body. He gave me betrayal. And I gave them both exactly what they deserved, a legacy written not in pain, but in power. So if you're watching this and someone has betrayed you while you were at your weakest, don't scream. Don't cry. Just smile. And get creative. Because karma doesn't need to knock. Sometimes, it rents the biggest billboard in New York City and tells the world for you. Like, share, and subscribe if you've ever trusted someone who stabbed you when you couldn't even stand. And tell me in the comments, where are you from? Because no matter where you are, betrayal speaks the same language. And so does revenge. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, but staged. Like someone had tiptoed around trying to hide their tracks. My pain was manageable, but the nausea wasn't from the meds anymore. It was from the memory of that text, "You're not like her." That sentence haunted me more than the photo. Because I had given him everything. My time. My loyalty. My body. My trust. And he had compared me to the sister I had almost died for. I stood up carefully, holding my side, and walked downstairs. The mug Jolene loved, the one that said "I woke up like this," was sitting in the sink. Lipstick smudged on the rim. But she hadn't been here, right? She was supposed to be at the hospital still. Or had she come home? No one had told me. I texted Matthew, "Me, where are you?" No reply. Me, did Jolene come home? Still nothing. I didn't expect an answer, not really. Because silence is also an answer, and it screams when it's guilty. Around noon, Jolene showed up. She let herself in with the spare key. She looked tired, hair undone, no makeup. "Hey, sis," she said softly, as if everything was normal. As if I hadn't seen her draped across my husband like a hand-me-down. She tried to hug me, but I stepped back. "How are you feeling?" she asked. I smiled. "Healing. Slowly." "You look good," she said. "You too," I lied. She walked into the kitchen like she lived there. Opened the fridge. Grabbed almond milk and poured herself a glass. I watched her hands shake slightly. Guilt? Or nerves? Or both? Either way, I said nothing. I just took in the performance, her pretending to be the grateful sister, the innocent houseguest, the fragile patient. But I'd seen the truth. And I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. Because calling out a liar too soon gives them time to prepare. I wanted her relaxed. Comfortable. Vulnerable. Later that night, when Matthew came home, the temperature in the room dropped. He kissed my forehead like nothing was wrong. Asked about my bandages. Jolene sat across from us on the couch, pretending to scroll through her phone. And for a moment, I looked at them both, my husband and my sister, and thought, "You are sitting in the home I built. Breathing the air I paid for. Wearing the smiles I used to believe in." It was surreal. Like watching actors in a play based on my life. I waited until they went to sleep. Then I got to work. I contacted my lawyer and added a clause to my new will: any infidelity voided spousal inheritance. I used an old connection in advertising to book digital billboard space on 42nd Street, yes, Times Square. I paid extra for rotation during the evening rush hour. I submitted their photos and crafted a caption so brutal, so unforgettable, it would burn into people's minds like a scar. Something poetic. Something final. But I wasn't done. I dug up the home's ownership paperwork. It was in my name. All of it. I changed the locks and filed a transfer clause that would give the house to a battered women's shelter if anything ever happened to me. I started recording everything, discreet cameras in the hallway, the kitchen, even the bedroom. I didn't need to catch them in the act. I just needed the tone. The tension. The micro-expressions that confirmed everything I knew. The house, my body, my marriage, everything felt like it had been hijacked. But what they didn't know was that I had already hijacked their future. They were lying side by side while I was building a cage around them. And when the door finally slammed shut, I'd make sure the whole world heard the lock click. When you give someone an organ, you expect pain. But not this kind. Not the ache that gnaws at your sanity while you smile through breakfast. I didn't sleep much after they went to bed. I sat alone in the kitchen, sipping cold tea, listening to the ticking clock and imagining how many lies were being whispered upstairs. Every thump on the floorboard made me flinch. Not because I was afraid, but because I was calculating. Mapping every step they took, every sigh, every creak of the bed that used to be mine alone. I used to be a woman who cried. But grief? It hardens you. Turns your tears into strategy. The next morning, Jolene cooked breakfast like she was auditioning for sainthood. Eggs, toast, even fresh orange juice. You need the vitamins, she chirped. She was wearing my apron. The one with the little embroidered tulips on the hem. I stared at her and thought, is there anything left that's mine? Matthew waltzed in, kissed her cheek, then mine. His gall was Olympic. You two look like twins this morning, he joked. I didn't laugh. Neither did Jolene. Her smile froze. He noticed, but didn't apologize. Just grabbed a plate and moved on. I excused myself and went back upstairs. I needed air. I needed space from their theater. But I also had work to do. Quiet work. Surgical. I opened the hidden folder on my laptop, Operation Clean Slate, I called it. It held recordings from the hallway camera, Jolene sneaking into our bedroom at 2:12 a.m., wearing nothing but one of Matthew's shirts. Another from the kitchen, them slow dancing to music on low, swaying like high school sweethearts. There was no sex caught on tape, but intimacy? Betrayal doesn't always need to be naked to be filthy. I emailed copies to myself, encrypted a backup in cloud storage, and scheduled a digital delivery to my lawyer in case something happened to me. Because paranoia isn't paranoia when you're living with snakes. That afternoon, I left the house under the guise of a doctor's follow-up. I told them not to wait for dinner. But I wasn't going to the clinic. I went to a place called Vision Craft Studios, a boutique marketing firm with a flair for scandal. I walked in wearing sunglasses and a hoodie, like a celebrity avoiding TMZ. I met with a young designer named Milo who didn't ask questions when I slid the flash drive across the table. Just opened it and raised an eyebrow. You want both of them in it, he asked. All three, I said. He looked confused. Me too, I clarified. I want my face on the left. Hers in the middle. His on the right. Use the same color filter. Make us look like one family. And the caption? I handed him a sheet of paper with what I'd written the night before. He read it, then looked up. You sure you want this out there? I'm not the one who should be ashamed, I said. He nodded. Okay. It'll be up next Friday. That gave me 6 days. 6 days to prepare. 6 days to tighten the screws. 6 days to smile like nothing was wrong while I lived in a house full of ghosts who didn't even realize the walls were closing in. That night, I baked a cake. Yes, really. Jolene's favorite, chocolate with raspberry swirl. I let her lick the spoon. I let Matthew kiss my cheek. I let them both laugh like fools at a show I didn't care about. But in my mind, I was building a script of my own. And the final act? Would be a masterpiece. By now, I had mastered the art of pretending. Smiling when I wanted to scream. Nodding while my ears rang with words I couldn't unhear. Every moment with Matthew and Jolene felt like standing in a room scented with sugar, sweet, yes, but too sweet. Sickly sweet. Like something was rotting underneath. I kept replaying that text from Matthew, the one that said, she'll be asleep for hours. That was me, she. Not even a name. Just an obstacle to navigate around. My heart hadn't broken. No, heartbreak was too soft a word. What I felt was disintegration. Silent. Slow. And irreversible. They both seemed lighter now. Jolene started humming around the house like she was in a musical. Matthew shaved more, dressed better, wore cologne again. Funny how cheating can invigorate the cheaters. It's like betrayal gave them a second wind. But I was the one who looked like a ghost, and they never noticed. Or maybe they didn't want to. That morning, Jolene suggested we take a sister day. Said we hadn't spent quality time since before the surgery. She wanted to go for manicures, lunch, even a walk by the lake. I said yes. Not because I wanted to, but because keeping your enemy close isn't just strategy, it's survival. At the nail salon, she picked a soft pink polish. I chose black. She laughed and said, "That's a little dark for you, isn't it?" I looked at her and smiled. "I'm feeling bold lately." The technician smiled politely, unaware that the woman seated across from me was sleeping with my husband. Jolene talked non-stop during lunch, about how grateful she was, how she was starting to feel like herself again. She even teared up and said, "You saved me, Dee. I'll never forget that." I looked at her and wanted to scream, "You forgot it 2 days later when you climbed into my bed." But I just reached across the table and held her hand. Because I wanted her to trust me. I wanted her to feel safe. Nothing burns brighter than betrayal when it comes from someone who looked you in the eye and smiled first. That night, after she fell asleep, I walked into the guest room. Her phone was unlocked. Sloppy. I already had the texts from Matthew, but now I wanted hers. And oh, did she deliver? Screenshots of Matthew's shirtless selfies. Flirty messages with timestamps that matched the days I was barely conscious. And then, audio. Voice notes. One of them whispered, "I love you. It's always been you." Not to me. To her. I emailed every file to myself and attached a personal message, saved for release, if needed. Then I added a little extra twist. I signed her up for a dating app using her real name and the same flirty photo she'd sent Matthew. Uploaded it to the cloud with a note, "Insurance. For later." Because if this ended in fire, I wanted the ashes to spell my name. The next morning, I made French toast. Matthew kissed me like nothing had happened. Jolene hugged me from behind. I almost laughed. Betrayal is never quiet, it just waits for the right moment to echo. So I asked them both, "How about we host a dinner party this weekend? Just the three of us. A celebration of healing. One last toast before I go back to work." They agreed, smiling, excited. Jolene even said she'd make the centerpiece. Matthew said he'd bring wine. I said I'd handle dessert. What they didn't know. It would be their last meal together in this house. Because the billboard went up in 4 days. And by then, everyone would know what they did. If you've ever sat across from people who betrayed you, smiling, laughing, sipping wine as if nothing happened, you'll know it's a strange kind of high. There's a power in silence. In knowing what they don't. In savoring the seconds before the trap snaps shut. That Friday, the night of the healing dinner, I played the role of the grateful sister, the doting wife, the woman they thought was too weak to see the truth. But I was watching everything. Every glance between them. Every inside joke. Every flicker of guilt disguised as cheer. I had set the table, yes, but what I really set was the stage. Jolene wore a floral dress. She complimented the table setting like she hadn't once plotted an entire affair beneath the same roof. Matthew brought an expensive bottle of red wine, said it was for celebration. I almost choked on the irony. They toasted to second chances. To family bonds. I raised my glass with a smile so practiced, it deserved an Oscar. Dinner was delicious. I made roast chicken with lemon thyme glaze, asparagus, and twice-baked potatoes. They complimented every bite. Jolene even said, "See? Even healing, you're still the best cook." I looked at her and said, "Even broken, I'm still the strongest person at this table." She laughed, not understanding. Matthew didn't look up. Then dessert came. Chocolate lava cakes, served warm. I'd piped little hearts on top with powdered sugar. I let them take the first bite before speaking. "You know," I said gently, "it's funny how people can digest betrayal better than honesty." Jolene blinked. What? I looked at Matthew. Did she tell you I found the texts? He froze, fork halfway to his mouth. Jolene's hand trembled. Or the audio? I asked, calmly folding my napkin. Matthew tried to speak. Delilah, wait, but I kept going. I know everything. Every touch. Every whispered lie. Every night you thought I was asleep and you were just two people connecting. I know it all. And I want you both to know that I'm not angry. Jolene looked like she might faint. You're not? No, I said, rising from my chair. Because anger is temporary. What I have for you both is eternal. I walked over to the living room, picked up the remote, and turned on the TV. The screen showed a live feed, a camera I'd hidden in the hallway weeks ago. Then another clip, Jolene entering my bedroom. Matthew slipping in behind her. No nudity. Just enough to prove the story. Jolene gasped. Matthew dropped his fork. You recorded us, he said, voice cracking. No. You recorded yourselves. I just pressed save. Then I dropped the real bomb. Check your phones. They both scrambled. I had scheduled a timed message to be sent exactly at that moment. Attached, the Billboard mock-up, the dating app Jolene was registered on, and the contact from the New York blog that had agreed to run their story. You didn't just cheat, I said, stepping closer. You staged your betrayal in the house I paid for, during the recovery I risked my life for. And now, the world gets to see what real gratitude looks like. Matthew stood up. We can explain. No, I said sharply. You could have. But the moment passed. You used my body to save hers, while using hers to betray me. And now you've both lost me. My love. My name. My money. They sat in stunned silence. I suggest you pack. You have until Sunday. Matthew's voice was hollow. You're kicking us out? I leaned down, face to face. No. I'm setting you free. Just like you wanted. And then I walked upstairs. The billboard went live the next morning. By the time the sun rose Saturday morning, I was already awake, coffee in hand, phone buzzing non-stop. The billboard had gone live at exactly 6 a.m. I hadn't even needed to set an alarm. My body knew what day it was. I logged on to the live Times Square cam and there it was, 3 faces. Mine, Matthew's, Jolene's. A split screen of betrayal. Captioned in bold white letters across a crimson background, she gave her sister a kidney. They gave her betrayal. Underneath it, smaller text read, Cheaters Awareness Project, NYC. My heart didn't race. It slowed. Like the calm before a storm that wasn't mine to weather anymore. I sipped my coffee and watched the tourists look up. Some pointed. Some took pictures. A man nudged his girlfriend and said something I couldn't hear, but I knew the words. I knew the whispers that would follow. I hadn't put my name on it. But I didn't have to. By 8 a.m., a woman I barely knew from high school messaged me, saw the billboard. It's you, right? If so, damn. Power move. By 9:15, a gossip blog called NYC Heat had reposted it, and the comments were vicious. Matthew looks like the type. You cheat on your sister while she's healing from surgery? Burn in hell. That woman gave you a body part and you gave her backstab. I sat on the couch scrolling, expressionless. Not joy. Not grief. Just relief. Like someone had finally yanked the truth out into the daylight, and it could no longer grow mold in my silence. Matthew was the first to react. He stormed downstairs, holding his phone like it had bitten him. What the hell is this? He snapped. You tell me, I said coolly. Seems like you made headlines. You put our faces up in Times Square? No, I said. Yours and hers. I just added mine so people would know who gave the kidney. His voice cracked. I'll lose my job. I could sue you. I looked him dead in the eye. Sue me for what? Telling the truth? You're a public figure. You did this. I just held up a mirror. He opened his mouth again, but Jolene came running in behind him, face pale, eyes rimmed with tears. Delilah, please, this is ruining my life. I stood. Good. People from my support group saw it, she cried. They're asking questions. My social page is flooded with hate. You deserve worse, I said, voice sharp as glass. But this is all I need. You made a mockery of my body, my marriage, and my trust. I'm simply making a monument of your choices. She reached for my hand. Please. Take it down. I pulled away. You know what hurts more than a scar across your abdomen? A knife in your back from someone you loved. I won't take it down. I'm just getting started. Matthew shouted, You're insane. I walked to the door, opened it, and pointed. You have 24 hours. Take your things. Take your mistress. Take your disgrace, and leave. He didn't move. So I turned on the TV. The news anchor was already covering it. An anonymous betrayal awareness campaign hits Times Square this morning, highlighting an affair between a man, his wife, and her sister, just after an organ donation. Viewers are calling it the most savage public call-out of the year. Matthew's hands dropped to his sides. Jolene began to cry. Neither said a word. I didn't need them to. Because the city was already speaking for me. And Times Square? Doesn't blink. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but no one tells you how loud it is. Because once the billboard went live, the sound of silence was replaced by something far more satisfying, the ripple. It began with the whispers. Then the texts. Then came the fallout. By Monday morning, Matthew's workplace had already been tagged in 3 viral reposts of the billboard. He was a senior manager at a financial consulting firm that prided itself on family values. Apparently, adultery with your wife's recovering sister didn't quite align with the image. I found out he was put on administrative leave when one of his coworkers, whom I'd never met, sent me a message that simply said, You didn't just drop a bomb. You lit a movement. Respect. Jolene, meanwhile, had vanished. Her phone was off. Her social media wiped clean. But the damage was done. Screenshots of her old posts about gratitude and second chances were circulating alongside the billboard. People were comparing her to Judas, some to Eve, others to Cain. I didn't encourage it. I didn't need to. The truth, once exposed, has a gravity of its own. As for me, I went grocery shopping with no makeup, in sweatpants, and still got stopped by 2 different women. One said, You're the sister, right? The one who gave the kidney? I nodded. She squeezed my hand and said, We're all rooting for you. The other simply hugged me, whispering, You did what we all dream of doing. That evening, my lawyer called. He chuckled before speaking. Delilah, I think your little project has turned into a legal landmark. Your prenup? Bulletproof. And Matthew's threats? Toothless. I filed your divorce paperwork this morning, grounds, infidelity and public disgrace. He doesn't get a cent. I should have cried then. Out of relief. But I didn't. I just stared out the window at the skyline and whispered, Good. Later that night, I poured myself a glass of wine, just one. I walked through the house slowly, room by room, touching the walls, the picture frames, the furniture we once picked together. It no longer hurt. It just felt hollow. Like an abandoned set from a show that had been cancelled. But then came the knock. I opened the door to find Jolene. She looked nothing like the confident, humming woman from last week. Her hair was frizzed, her eyes swollen. She was wearing an oversized hoodie, no makeup, lips cracked. And in her arms, she held a gift bag. "Please," she said. "Can I come in?" I didn't move. "Why?" "I don't want to fight," she said, voice trembling. I needed to say I'm sorry. I was sick. Desperate. Lonely. I didn't plan to fall for him. I tilted my head. "But you did." She looked down. "Yes." I crossed my arms. "And you climbed into my marriage knowing I'd given you my body, literally." Her lip quivered. "You were always perfect. I was always the shadow. You got the life I wanted." I stayed silent. She held out the gift bag. "It's my journal. I want you to have it. So you know it wasn't just lust. I loved him. I hate myself for it. But it was real." I didn't take the bag. "Do you want me to forgive you?" "I don't deserve that," she said softly. "But maybe you'll understand." I shook my head. "No. What I understand is this: you could have had my love forever. You chose my husband for a season. Now you have neither." Then I closed the door. I didn't slam it. I didn't shout. I just locked it. And for the first time in months, I slept like a woman who wasn't healing from betrayal, but building a new body from it. After I closed the door on Jolene, I stood there for a moment, my hand on the lock, my heart as steady as stone. There was no shaking. No anger left to bleed out. Just a cold, quiet resolve. I had built a life brick by brick, only to watch them dig a tunnel beneath it. But what they didn't realize was this: I still owned the foundation. The next morning, I called a cleaning service. Not the usual weekly team, no. I wanted something deeper. I asked for a full reset. A cleansing. A physical purge. I stripped the bed, dumped the sheets, burned the pillowcases. Anything her skin had touched, I tossed. I vacuumed the vents. Had the rugs steam cleaned. Replaced every photo in the hallway. The smiling wedding portrait? Gone. Our anniversary frame? Gone. Instead, I put up a single canvas in the living room. Black and white. No faces. Just a quote that read, "You didn't break me. You just made space for something better." The house no longer felt haunted. It felt reclaimed. But that was just the beginning. I hired a contractor to repaint the guest room. The color? A warm, defiant crimson. I ordered new furniture, sleek, modern, powerful. No more soft corners or pastel tones. The woman who used to live here died in that hospital bed. The one who returned was forged in fire. And then came the knock I did expect. It wasn't Jolene this time. It was a woman named Margot from the Today Show. She held a folder, wore a blazer, and spoke with calm urgency. "Delilah, we'd love to interview you. The country has fallen in love with your story." I blinked. "Fallen in love with my pain, you mean?" She smiled, but there was a softness in her eyes. "No. With your power. You've inspired women across the country. Our producers are calling you the Billboard Widow. You've become a symbol." I didn't agree right away. I told her I'd think about it. But later that night, I looked at my inbox, over 600 messages. Most were from women. Strangers. Some barely out of their teens. Some in their 70s. All saying the same thing: "You gave me the courage to leave. I wish I had done what you did. You made me believe in consequences again." I cried then. Quiet, grateful tears. Because maybe all this pain wasn't just mine to carry. Maybe it was meant to become something more. The next day, I sent Margot a message: "I'll do it. But I want to control the narrative. I'm not a victim. I'm the writer of this story now. She replied within seconds, agreed. Let's make your truth louder than their lies. And just like that, I wasn't just healing anymore. I was building something. A new voice. A new mission. A new legacy. Matthew and Jolene had taken everything they could from me, except one thing, my ability to rebuild. And I would do it on a stage they could never reach. They dressed me in soft navy. Professional, elegant, but strong. I chose the outfit myself. No stylists. No handlers. I told the Today Show team, if I'm telling my story, I'm wearing my armor. The studio lights were blinding. The makeup artist dabbed my forehead. The producer whispered in my ear, "You look incredible. America's going to love you." But I didn't want to be loved. I wanted to be heard. The host smiled, her voice soft and sweet. "Delilah Harris, thank you for joining us. You've become a national phenomenon overnight. How does it feel to be, well, the woman who exposed betrayal in Times Square?" I took a breath. Not shaky. Not nervous. Just steady. "It feels overdue," I said. "Not just for me, but for every woman who's been told to suffer in silence." She nodded. "Can you walk us through what happened?" I leaned forward. I gave my sister a kidney. Days later, while I was still recovering from surgery, she slept with my husband, under my roof. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't burn their clothes. I put their faces on a billboard in the middle of the most crowded place in America. Because I wanted them to feel what I felt, exposed. The host looked stunned for a moment. "And you don't regret it?" I met her gaze. Not for a second. From there, the interview rolled like thunder. We talked about betrayal, silence, how women are shamed for being angry. I spoke about love, grief, and how sometimes healing requires public honesty. The camera captured every word. And when the segment aired that night, it exploded. #BillboardWidow began trending worldwide. I was flooded with interview requests, podcast invites, even a book deal proposal. But I didn't say yes to everything. I was careful. Strategic. This wasn't fame. This was my warpath. And then came the backlash. Matthew appeared on a local news station. His suit was wrinkled, his voice tired. "I made a mistake," he said. "But the billboard? That was cruel. We were a family. She humiliated us." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because the same night his interview aired, an anonymous email arrived in my inbox. Subject line: "You should see what your ex-husband sent me." Attached were screenshots. Messages from Matthew. Dated before my surgery. Flirting with multiple women. Complaints about me being emotionally distant and too focused on her sister's health. The sender? A woman named Vanessa. An old friend of mine. Apparently, he had tried to sleep with her, too. She turned him down. But kept the receipts. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just saved the files, replied, "Thank you," and scheduled a meeting with my attorney for the next morning. Matthew wasn't just a cheater. He was a serial one. And now that the public knew what he did, they would soon learn who he really was. As for Jolene? Well, she resurfaced in the most unexpected way. An Instagram reel. Not posted by her, but about her. A young man recorded her at a pharmacy, crying, trying to pick up a prescription without insurance. She looked gaunt, scared, and utterly lost. The caption read, "Saw this woman crying in CVS. She said she ruined her life for someone who left her anyway. Hope she finds peace." The comments were brutal. "She deserves it. She should have thought about that before opening her legs. This is karma." But I didn't smile. Not this time. Because revenge doesn't feel like victory when the person you once loved looks broken. Still, I didn't reach out. Forgiveness might come later. But right now? I was busy turning my pain into a platform. When your name becomes a symbol, you start to wonder if people see you anymore, or just the headline. For days after the TV interview, I was inundated with attention. Support poured in from every direction. Brands offered me sponsorships. Advocacy groups wanted to partner. I received messages from betrayed wives, single mothers, even divorce attorneys thanking me for reclaiming dignity in public. But underneath all the noise, I felt something deeper. A quiet urge. Not for revenge anymore, but for purpose. I started volunteering at a local women's shelter. Not in front of cameras, behind the scenes. Folding linens. Replacing toothbrushes. Listening. Most of these women had no billboards, no lawyers, no social campaigns. They were invisible. But every one of them had a story. One night, a woman with a bruised wrist whispered to me, "I watched your interview in a hospital bed. You gave me the courage to walk away." I didn't respond with some inspirational quote. I just held her hand and nodded. Because that was enough. Then came his email. Subject line, "You don't know me, but I knew you. Years ago." It was from Ben Talbot, the producer of a major documentary series. I remembered the name faintly. He was once a guest speaker at a hospital fundraiser I'd helped organize in my early nursing days. He wrote, "Delilah, I've been following your story not as a voyeur, but as a filmmaker. What you've done isn't just revenge. It's cultural. I want to tell it. But not in a salacious, tabloid way. I want to film a docuseries about betrayal, resilience, and what women do when society stops listening. I want you to narrate it. Not just your story, but others like it. You wouldn't just be a subject, you'd be the voice." I read the message 3 times. Then closed my laptop and walked into the backyard barefoot, letting the grass touch my feet. The air was warm. The sky was velvet. For the first time in months, I felt peace. Not because my pain was gone, but because it had finally found direction. The next day, I met Ben at a downtown cafe. He was in his mid-40s, thoughtful eyes, and none of that Hollywood slickness. "You're not what I expected," he said, smiling. "Neither are you," I replied. He slid a folder across the table with mock-ups, episode concepts, statistics. Then he said something that made my chest tighten, "You're not just a story. You're a mirror." And right now, a lot of women need to see themselves in someone who didn't burn down, but built something stronger. I didn't say yes. Not immediately. I needed time. I needed space. But I walked away from that meeting knowing something had shifted. And back at home, another shift was waiting. A certified envelope sat on my doorstep. From Jolene. Inside was a single-page letter. No apologies. No begging. Just one paragraph, "I'm leaving the city. I won't bother you again. But I need you to know. I was pregnant. I lost it the same week the billboard went up. I don't blame you. I blame me. He hasn't called me since. And I think I finally understand what I destroyed." No signature. Just that. I stood on the porch, letter in hand, watching the sun sink. There was no triumph in me. No vengeance high. Just silence. Heavy and final. I folded the paper. Lit a match. Watched it burn in the grill. Some truths don't deserve to be stored. Only released. The next week felt like stepping into a new version of myself. Not Delilah, the nurse. Not Delilah, the betrayed wife. But Delilah, the narrator. The witness. The builder. I agreed to Ben's project. Signed the contract after reading every line, making sure the story would be told the way I lived it, raw, unfiltered, and unflinching. The docuseries would be called Beneath the Scar. I didn't just want to tell my story. I wanted to hold a microphone to the stories most people ignored. The studio gave us full creative control. Each episode would feature a different woman who had survived betrayal, through marriage, family, friendship, even religion. But I insisted we start small, local. Real people. Not just salacious headlines. That's how I met Shayla Morales. She came recommended by the women's shelter where I'd been volunteering. Early 30s. Once a successful caterer. Lost everything after her fiancé embezzled from her business and pinned it on her. She was the kind of woman who smiled with her lips but never her eyes. When we sat across from each other in the production space, the cameras off for now, she spoke softly at first. But the longer we talked, the more her voice cracked open like a wound finally allowed to breathe. He told me I'd be nothing without him, she said. Then he took my clients, my accounts, and married my assistant. My stomach churned. It wasn't the same betrayal as mine, but it bled in the same color. I lost my apartment. My name. People thought I was a criminal. He said if I spoke up, he'd release his things. What things? I asked. She looked away. Videos. Messages. Things from years ago. I paused. Revenge porn? She nodded slowly. I reached out and touched her hand. You're safe now. This time, the camera is yours. She looked up. Then I'll tell everything. Her interview became the centerpiece of episode 2. Vulnerable. Brave. Devastating. But after we wrapped, something strange happened. Ben called me late that night. Did you see the footage from her exit interview? I hadn't. He sent it over. I watched it in my home office, in silence. It was Shayla, sitting with one of the crew. She didn't know the mic was still on. And what she said felt like ice water down my spine. Delilah's strong. Smart. But she has no idea. He's still watching her. He told me so. Said she won't see it coming. The crew member asked, who? Shayla whispered, her ex Matthew. He reached out to me before filming. He tried to pay me to mention her name, to reframe her. The audio ended there. I sat frozen. Breath caught. He was still trying to control the story. Still trying to rewrite history. But what he didn't know was that now I owned the pen. I called Ben immediately. We're going to air it, I said. That clip. That moment. That threat. Are you sure? He asked. Absolutely, I replied. Let him know what it feels like when the whole world sees you. Because the billboard was just the beginning. Now, the lens was mine. I didn't sleep that night. I sat with my laptop open, headphones still clamped over my ears, Shayla's whispered words replaying on loop in my mind. He's still watching her. She has no idea. It was the kind of fear that doesn't scream, it sinks. Into your skin. Into your breath. I kept thinking, how long has he been trying to twist this? Who else has he spoken to? By morning, I had a decision to make. One that would decide whether this docuseries was a gentle candlelight vigil or a wildfire. I called Ben. Put the audio in. Unedited. In the next trailer. I want the world to know exactly what kind of man he is. There was a long pause on the line. Then Ben said, understood. The trailer dropped 48 hours later. And it exploded. The clip started with me narrating in voiceover, when someone betrays you, it doesn't end with the affair. It continues in the silence, in the smear campaigns, in the quiet attempts to make you look like the villain. Then Shayla's voice, Delilah has no idea. He's still watching her. He tried to pay me to reframe her. Boom. Social media detonated. Hashtag still watching her began trending within hours. People dissected every word. TikTok videos analyzing Matthew's manipulation hit millions of views. Podcasts debated whether this was just narcissism or something darker. And then came the message. An anonymous account. No photo. No name. Just a DM on my professional page. He was at my gym. I overheard him saying she thinks she's safe because she's loud now. Be careful. I stared at the message, bile rising in my throat. Not fear. Fury. He didn't just want to destroy my name. He wanted to haunt me. To stalk me from the shadows of his own humiliation. I called my lawyer. We filed a cease and desist immediately. Then I took it a step further. I filed for a restraining order. Ben asked me if I still wanted to keep filming. I didn't even hesitate. Now more than ever. That weekend, I sat down in front of the camera, not in a studio. In my own living room. Just me, raw. No makeup. Natural lighting. And I looked straight into the lens. To the man who thinks he's still watching me, watch this. You can't erase me. You can't control me. You can't smear what's already been sterilized by truth. I gave you my love, my home, my loyalty, and when you burned it, I planted something stronger in the ashes. And every woman who's ever been silenced? We're louder now. We're documenting. And we're not backing down. When the episode aired, the response was electric. Survivor groups flooded our inbox. Police officers, nurses, therapists, all reaching out with their own stories. The docuseries wasn't just a show now. It had become a movement. And Matthew? He disappeared from public view entirely. But the damage was already done. To him. Not to me. Because when the world saw the full truth, they didn't call me bitter. They called me brave. The invitation came with gold foil lettering and a note: you are not just a guest, you are the reason this panel exists. It was a women's empowerment summit in Chicago. Thousands were attending. The docuseries had grown beyond screens. It was now in classrooms, in shelters, in government offices. I wasn't just narrating stories anymore, I was shaping them. The event was held in a grand theater. Velvet seats. A stage trimmed in light. Backstage, my name was printed on the panel placard: Delilah Harris, survivor. Advocate. Voice. The irony made me laugh softly. A year ago, I was bleeding in bed while my husband whispered into my sister's mouth. Now I was about to speak to a sold-out crowd about reclaiming power. The moderator asked thoughtful questions. I shared my journey without bitterness. Only clarity. When I spoke about the billboard, the audience laughed, not mockery, but awe. When I talked about the restraining order, they clapped. But when I said, I no longer want revenge, I want reform, the room fell into still silence. Then came Canday. Microphones were passed. Women stood, thanked me, shared their pain. One woman said, I was cheated on while I was in chemotherapy. Your story gave me the courage to say his name out loud. Another whispered, I left last week. With nothing. But I have your words printed on my mirror. And then I saw her. 5th row. Right aisle seat. She raised her hand slowly, hesitantly. The microphone reached her, and she stood. Blonde hair. Light freckles. Familiar eyes. My name is Caroline Blake, she said, voice shaking. I don't know if Delilah remembers me, but we went to nursing school together. My chest tightened. I did remember her. We were study partners for a year. Then she dropped out after a messy relationship with one of the instructors. Rumors had swirled. She had vanished. I never thought I'd see her again, she continued, her voice cracking, but I've followed everything she's done. Anne. I have something to tell her. Something I should have told her years ago. The room stilled. I nodded slowly. Go ahead, Caroline. She swallowed hard. Your husband, Matthew, he contacted me years ago. Before your sister. Before all this. When you were still in nursing rotations. He tried to sleep with me too. Gasps in the crowd. My pulse spiked. I said no, she added quickly. But he threatened to get me removed from the program. He said he'd tell the dean I was unstable. So I dropped out. I disappeared. And I've felt guilty ever since, like if I'd spoken up, maybe you wouldn't have gone through what you did. My mouth went dry. I stood slowly. Walked to the edge of the stage. Caroline, I said softly, you don't owe me guilt. You were manipulated. Just like I was. And now, you're here. That matters more than silence ever did. Tears streamed down her cheeks. The audience stood. Applause thundered. And in that moment, I realized something. Matthew wasn't just a cheater. He was a predator. A pattern. A man who had been weaponizing charm long before Jolene. Long before me. But now? We were a pattern too. Of women who refused to stay quiet. The next morning, I met Caroline for coffee at a quiet cafe near the hotel. She looked lighter somehow, like speaking the truth had peeled a decade off her shoulders. I stirred my tea in silence, then finally asked, why now? She didn't hesitate. Because I saw you survive him publicly. And I realized. I was still bleeding privately. We talked for hours. She told me about the professor who tried to cover up what Matthew did. How Matthew manipulated others into painting her unstable. It was the same tactic he tried on me when I first confronted him after the affair with Jolene, gaslight, then retreat. It wasn't just a cheating scandal. It was a pattern of coercion and control. And the more Caroline talked, the more puzzle pieces clicked into place. I kept a folder, she said suddenly, pulling out her phone. Emails. Screenshots. Even a voice message I never deleted. She played it. Matthew's voice, smooth, calm, cruel. No one will believe you, Caroline. Not with your history. Walk away before you ruin what's left of your life. My stomach turned. I wasn't the only one he'd tried to erase. By the end of our conversation, we had made a decision. We were going to build a timeline. Every woman. Every whisper. Every dismissal. We weren't just going to expose what Matthew did. We were going to expose who he was. Back in my hotel room, I opened my laptop and started the outline. At the top, in bold, the pattern. Below that, I listed names. Dates. Incidents. Caroline. Shayla. Me. The nurse from the recovery ward who once mentioned Matthew being very attentive to Jolene before the surgery. The neighbor Jenny, who once caught him accidentally walking into her house during a barbecue, claiming he thought it was the bathroom. I called Ben. We're adding an episode, I told him. A special exposé. No dramatization. Just truth. Just receipts. He agreed instantly. But before we could film, something happened. A letter arrived at my home. Handwritten. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of lined paper with 5 words. You don't know everything yet. That was it. No signature. Just, warning. I held the paper like it might burn me. Was it from Caroline? No, her handwriting was looped and elegant. This was sharp, slanted, mail. Was it Matthew? Someone connected to him? I texted Ben a photo of the note. Could be nothing. Could be everything. He replied immediately, keep everything. This story just cracked open wider. Later that night, I stood in front of my hallway mirror and stared at my reflection. For the first time, I saw not just a survivor, but an investigator. This wasn't about pain anymore. This was about legacy. And Matthew was about to realize, you can't run from what you left in every room. I spent the next 2 days chasing shadows. That letter, those 5 words, stayed in my head like a drumbeat, you don't know everything yet. I retraced every name on the timeline. Every woman who had crossed paths with Matthew. I even messaged women I hadn't spoken to in over a decade, some who had only vaguely known him. Most had nothing. But one said something that turned my blood cold. Her name was Helena. She had dated one of Matthew's old college friends. I remembered her vaguely from an alumni brunch years ago. She responded to my message almost immediately. I don't know if this helps, but back in college, there was a rumor. Something happened with a girl. It was swept under the rug. Faculty got involved. But it disappeared fast. I asked for a name. She sent it, Maya Densler. I'd never heard it before. A quick search revealed only scraps, an old college yearbook photo, a blurry graduation mention, and then nothing. No social media. No employment records. Just gone. Like she'd evaporated after undergrad. I called Ben. I think he did something worse. Something criminal. We ran a private records request on Maya Densler. It took a few hours, but what came back made me sit down. In 2004, Maya had filed a complaint at their university. Sexual coercion. The accused, Matthew A. Langston. The file had been sealed. A settlement had been reached. She dropped out weeks later. It wasn't just emotional abuse. It wasn't just manipulation. Matthew had a history. And it had been covered up. I sat in my kitchen staring at the document. The words blurred. I thought I had seen the worst of him. But this was something deeper. Something that explained everything. The way he moved. The way he silenced. The pattern wasn't new. It was trained. I looked down at the paper again. Settlement amount, $75,000. Bought silence. For trauma. I called Caroline. I think we've found the beginning. She met me that afternoon with Shayla. We sat around my kitchen table like a tribunal. I showed them the file. Caroline's hands trembled. Shayla's eyes welled. Caroline whispered, "That could have been me." I nodded. It almost was. Ben agreed to dedicate a full episode to Maya, titled simply The Girl Who Disappeared. But there was one problem, we couldn't find her. All our leads hit dead ends. The address on the report was decades old. Her phone numbers disconnected. Every door we knocked on stayed shut. Until 3 nights later. I got an email. Subject, "You found me." It was from Maya. She had seen the trailer. She had heard her name. And she wrote, "I've spent 20 years trying to forget his face. But if you're finally telling the truth, I want in. I'm ready." My hands shook as I read her message. Not from fear, but from something else, reckoning. Because now, with Maya's voice, we weren't just women with stories. We were witnesses. And Matthew Langston was finally out of places to hide. Maya arrived at the studio unannounced. No warning. No handlers. Just walked through the front doors wearing dark jeans, a navy coat, and a look in her eyes that I recognized instantly, not fear. History. She nodded at Ben, at the crew, and then found me. I stood up to greet her. She didn't smile. She simply said, "You look like someone who's been through it." I nodded. You too. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. There was a shared gravity between us that didn't require softness. She sat under the lights, placed her hands in her lap, and when the cameras rolled, she looked straight into the lens and said, my name is Maya Densler. In 2004, Matthew Langston assaulted me in his dorm room. I reported it. I was told I misunderstood. He graduated with honors. I dropped out. Ben signaled to pause, but Maya waved it off. No, she said. Let it run. I want them to hear me when I shake. She told the story from beginning to end. How he isolated her. Gaslit her. How her roommate was paid off to stay silent. How administrators steered her toward a quiet resolution. I took the money, she admitted. Because I wanted to disappear. But I never did. He followed me, in my nightmares, in my relationships, in the jobs I never kept. And when I saw his face on your billboard, Delilah, I almost threw up. Because even 20 years later, I still felt like the girl who vanished. I sat off camera, barely breathing. When the cameras cut, Maya turned to me. He didn't just break us, you know. He learned how to train himself through us. I nodded slowly. He's been practicing cruelty like a career. That night, I invited her to my home. We stayed up until 2 a.m., drinking herbal tea and connecting dots we hadn't realized were shared. Same language. Same threats. Same way he shifted blame with honey in his voice. I always wondered, she whispered, how many more of us there were. I stared at the wall, at the timeline I'd built over weeks. I think we're just scratching the surface. The next morning, Ben called. You sure you want to air it? This could go legal. I replied without blinking. Good. When the episode aired, titled The Girl Who Disappeared, the response made the billboard look like a whisper. News outlets picked it up within hours. Matthew's former employer issued a public statement. We condemn all past behavior brought to light and are conducting a formal review. But then came the bombshell. A journalist named Priya Olson messaged me directly. I've been working on something. I tried to publish it years ago, but the outlet buried it. I have names. More settlements. A paper trail. She sent over the first document. 3 names. 3 schools. All the same pattern. And one clear detail that made my skin crawl, all were sealed with non-disclosure agreements. All linked to Matthew Langston's consulting work with universities on student behavioral reform. He hadn't just learned how to manipulate. He'd turned it into a side business. I stood in the center of my kitchen, fists clenched, heart hammering. Because now, this wasn't just my story. Or Maya's. Or Shayla's. It was a network of hidden harm. And I had just become the face of its undoing. The next few days blurred into a storm of phones ringing, articles publishing, inboxes overflowing. What began as a documentary had erupted into a national inquiry. University alumni flooded forums. More women stepped forward. Some offered full names. Others used aliases. But their stories matched like pieces from the same nightmare: coercion, fear, dismissal, settlements, silence. The system had protected him. But now, it was splintering. The pattern was undeniable. And still, none of us had said his name on air. Not legally. Not yet. But that changed the moment Priya, the journalist, found the key. One university, not the oldest, not the most prestigious, had recently updated its code of conduct and voided all prior NDAs related to sexual misconduct. They hadn't announced it publicly, but buried in the bylaws was one critical sentence: survivors may speak freely without fear of legal retaliation, regardless of prior agreements, provided claims are made in good faith. And guess what? One of Matthew's earliest settlements, Maya's, was from that exact university. I stared at the clause, then stared at Maya, who sat on my couch holding the printed document. You're free, I whispered. She blinked. I never thought I'd see the day. Ben called that evening. If she agrees to go on record, really on record, we can publish it. We can say his name. And once one does, others will follow. Maya didn't hesitate. The next filming session was different. No anonymity. No shadows. Maya sat before the camera, shoulders squared, voice firm. His name is Matthew Langston. He assaulted me in 2004. He paid to keep me silent. And I am silent no longer. The second that footage aired, it was like a dam broke. More than a dozen women contacted us. A few with names I recognized, colleagues, former neighbors. Others were strangers. But every single one had receipts, text messages, emails, even dated letters of complaints that had gone unanswered. What stunned me most wasn't how many women came forward. It was how many men did. One wrote, "He tried to coach me on how to shut down a messy breakup. Said he had experience. Said you gotta bury their side of the story fast." Another, "I worked PR on one of his university cases. He told me, if the girl cries too loud, find a prettier victim to distract the media." I felt sick. But I also felt ready. Ben, Maya, Shayla, Caroline, and I decided to host a live roundtable episode, no scripts, no cuts. Just 5 women sitting at a table, names and faces shown, telling the world how a predator had moved freely for 2 decades, because people chose silence over discomfort. We broadcast it online. Over 2 million people tuned in within the first 12 hours. The chat feed didn't stop. This is our reckoning. I was her. They are us. And then, just as we finished the stream, Ben's assistant walked in, pale. "You need to see this." She handed him a tablet. Ben turned to me. "It's him." Matthew had released a video. Posted to a shadow account under the name The Truth Is Missing. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a denial. It was a threat dressed as justification. He called us bitter women. Said we fed on drama like addicts. That we twisted flirtation into accusations. And then he said, "Delilah started all this. She's not a hero. She's an opportunist with a vengeance complex. And if you don't believe me, ask her sister." The air left the room. He had just dragged Jolene back into the spotlight. Not as his co-conspirator, but as his next shield. And I knew, the final storm had just begun. I hadn't spoken to Jolene since the letter, the one where she told me about the miscarriage, about Matthew abandoning her, about disappearing from the city. After that, I let silence grow between us. It was easier than looking into the eyes of someone who'd slept with your husband while your body was still bandaged from saving hers. I thought we'd said everything that ever needed saying. But after Matthew's video, her silence became dangerous. He had positioned her as the final puzzle piece in his twisted defense. Not as the betrayer, but as the alibi. The one person who could spin the narrative. It was just a love triangle. Delilah was bitter. The sister was the real victim. I stared at my screen for an hour after watching his video. I read every word of the transcript. Bitter. Manipulative. Overdramatic. He was doing it again, flipping the script and dragging Jolene into his rewrite. And that was the moment I realized. I couldn't leave her unprotected. I didn't want to call her. I didn't want to see her. But I knew I had to warn her. I sent a short message. "He's using your name. Again. You deserve to control your story." No reply. Not that night. Not the next. Then, just after midnight on the 3rd day, she showed up at my door. No makeup. No filters. Just Jolene. She held up her phone wordlessly. On the screen was Matthew's video. Her hand trembled as she clutched it. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I thought he left me because he was scared. But he's been planning this." I stepped aside. "Come in." We didn't sit. We didn't make tea. We stood in the hallway like two statues cracked by the same sculptor. She spoke first. "I was wrong," she said. "So wrong. I thought what we had was real. But he only ever loved one thing, his reflection." I nodded. "He told me you were the manipulative one. That you were cold. Controlling. And I believed him. Because it made me feel like I wasn't a monster." "But you were," I said quietly. She flinched. "But so was I added. For staying quiet when I first suspected him. For loving someone who made me ignore my gut." We stood in that truth together. Then she looked at me with a haunted expression. "I want to speak. On camera. On record. I want to tell the truth. Not just about the affair. But about who he was. What he said. What he did." I studied her face. "Why now?" "Because I'm done paying for his sins." Ben set up the studio within 12 hours. No lights. No makeup. Just Jolene and a mic. And what she shared broke everything. She talked about Matthew's emotional games. How he dangled validation like a treat. How he told her he only married me for stability. How he once confessed, jokingly, but not really, that the best way to ruin a woman was to convince her it was all her fault. She looked directly at the lens and said, "He used me to hurt Delilah. And when I was no longer useful, he disappeared. I've lived with guilt every day. But guilt is better than denial. Because guilt demands change." That single clip went more viral than any billboard, any headline. Because betrayal by a husband was one thing. Betrayal by a sister who owned it? That was a different kind of brave. The comment sections flooded. "This is what accountability looks like. Delilah and Jolene, two women, one war, same enemy." It wasn't a love triangle. It was a power circle he drew around himself. And then, the final domino fell. Maya called me with news. A civil rights firm had taken notice of the docuseries. With the evidence, testimonies, paper trail, and now the public pressure, a formal multi-victim civil suit was being drafted. Against Matthew Langston. He would finally be named. Not just in hashtags. But in court. The lawsuit made headlines across every major outlet within 24 hours. Langston named in multi-victim civil suit. It was surreal seeing it. His name, bold and unshielded, finally dragged into the light. No initials. No euphemisms. Just the truth spelled out, printed, spoken aloud by anchors who once ignored voices like ours. The court filing included affidavits from 6 women. Maya, Shayla, Caroline, 2 anonymous plaintiffs, and me. Yes. I added my name. Because by now, I'd learned the power of owning what was done to you before they tried to call it something else. The courtroom was packed on the first day of proceedings. Not for a criminal trial, yet, but the civil suit was strong, undeniable, and it had teeth. We were suing not just for damages, but for patterned psychological and reputational abuse. Emotional manipulation. Coordinated silencing. Matthew's lawyer asked for a private mediation. We declined. He tried to issue statements through intermediaries. Claimed the accusations were exaggerated, that he was being cancelled. We didn't flinch. And that's when he walked in. It was strange seeing him again. Not on a screen. Not through an article or video. But in the same room. He looked smaller. Not physically. But diminished. Like the mirror that once reflected his charm had finally cracked, and now he was standing in shards he couldn't sweep away. He wouldn't look at me. Wouldn't look at any of us. The judge set the dates for testimony. Media camped outside the courthouse like it was a celebrity trial. They called us the Six. But behind that name were real wounds. Real documents. Real women. And then, in the middle of it all, Jolene made a choice I never expected. She filed a separate deposition. Not as a victim. As a witness. She confessed, on record, to what she saw. What she was told. Even things I hadn't known. The way Matthew coached her to look weepy when the affair was exposed. How he laughed after I confronted them, saying, "She'll either cry or retaliate, either way, she loses." I read that line and didn't even blink. Because I hadn't lost. He had. Each woman who testified added another nail in the coffin he'd spent years building for everyone but himself. Maya's voice was calm. Caroline cried. Shayla didn't even need notes. I told the court about the kidney. About the affair. But most of all, I told them about the silence I lived in. The one he built around me like a room with no windows. When I stepped down from the witness stand, I caught his eyes for a second. Just one. And in that look, I saw it. Not fear. Recognition. He finally saw me not as the woman he betrayed, but as the one he could never silence again. The case was set to continue for weeks. But I knew. The verdict was already echoing. Not just in the courtroom, but in every woman who watched this story unfold and whispered to herself, "Me too." Before I share how this story ends, let me speak to those who've walked beside me from the very beginning, those who watched me rise from the hospital bed where my body was stitched and my heart was torn open, to the courtroom where my voice echoed with every name he tried to bury. If you've ever been betrayed by the people you trusted most, by family, by lovers, by systems, then I hope this story felt like it belonged to you too. And if it did, before we finish, please like, share, and subscribe my channel. And tell me, where are you from? Because betrayal is global, but so is justice. Now, here's how it ends. The lawsuit settled just after closing arguments. We never got a jury's verdict, but we didn't need one. The judge read aloud a single line from his statement. The evidence presented shows a consistent and disturbing pattern of coercion, misconduct, and calculated harm. While not criminally adjudicated in this courtroom, the civil relief requested is warranted and granted in full. We won. Matthew Langston was ordered to pay a high seven-figure settlement. His consulting licenses were revoked. His name was blacklisted across multiple academic networks. And most important? His silence could no longer be anyone else's. He disappeared from public life. No interviews. No statements. Just a man stripped of the mask he wore for 20 years. As for Jolene? She stayed in the city. She started attending group therapy. We speak occasionally, never as sisters again, but as witnesses to the same man's destruction. And honestly, that's enough. Caroline went back to nursing. She now mentors survivors. Shayla reopened her catering business. Maya? She's writing a book. And me? I stood in Times Square exactly 1 year after the billboard went up, alone this time, no camera crew, no lights. Just me. The faces were gone. The ad had long been replaced by a streaming service promo. But I looked up and whispered, "I gave you my body. You gave me betrayal. But I gave myself back my name." Then I went home. A home that was finally mine. Clean. Quiet. Undisturbed. And as I walked through the kitchen, the hallway, the bedroom, I touched nothing. Because I didn't need to change the space anymore. I had changed. This story was never about revenge. It was about removal of shame, of silence, of the lie that says when someone breaks you, you stay broken. I am not broken. I am the narrator. And you? If you're still watching, still listening, you are part of the story now. So speak up. Write your ending. Build your billboard. Because healing isn't private anymore. It's public. And sometimes, the loudest thing you can do after betrayal is live louder than they ever expected.